What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here, and today we're going to talk about what could be my dream grinder. This is the Kafatek M98V. M stands for monolith, 98 for 98mm, and V for vertical. Kafatek is a Seattle, Washington-based company where they build most everything in-house, outside of some of the electronics and the motor, and as well as some of the fittings. This grinder right here is $4,200 US. Yes, I did pay $4,200 for this grinder. I did not get it for free. I did not get some sort of influencer discount, as some of you think happens all the time. Nope, I buy the things that I use, with very few exceptions, one being this $20,000 lever machine behind me, which I have on loan because that's a little too crazy. But that's a future review. Some of you are going to see this and think it's ugly. I've seen a comment saying it's like the Cybertruck of coffee grinders. I've seen people talk about how it looks like a Minecraft type of thing, and I get that. He tried to make a departure, he as in Dennis, the founder and designer of Kafatek, from their kind of normal looking machines, which is like this, the Monolith Max 3. So this is their kind of typical aesthetic. Even with their cone grinder, it has a similar aesthetic to this. But they made a departure to make a more filter first grinder.
Also secret. Well, maybe secret.
When this was announced about last year on Brian Kwan's YouTube channel, he went up to the warehouse of Kafatek and he was able to unveil this grinder. There was some confusion surrounding what this grinder could do because they kind of call it a filter grinder. So a lot of people assume that meant it can only do filter, when in reality, Dennis's idea with this grinder was to produce something that was more of a filter workflow. So whereas the Monolith Max 3, you have like portafilter forks, it's kind of ideal for brewing or grinding espresso direct into the portafilter. He wanted to make one where the workflow was centered on filter, which is cool. But my excitement is not necessarily around that. It's around a lot of other decisions that were made in the creation of the grinder. Within the current confines of innovation in the grinder world, this hits most everything that I have been clamoring on about for the past few years in different grinder reviews and in different grinder theory videos, and is the first one to do everything I've asked for properly. What are those things that I've been clamoring on about for years? If you've been following the channel for a while, you likely already know. If you haven't, well, this is your time to hit the subscribe, because we get real nerdy here. We talk about burr theory, we talk about how to brew light roast, dark roast, gushers, soup, we talk about traditional espresso, we talk about all different types of machines, and we go crazy here. So if you want to hit the subscribe button, I would really like it. If you need some more time to see if I'm too annoying, it's fine too. And hitting the like button helps a lot too. I specifically ask for vertically mounted burrs. I believe that to be the best way for a quick throughput of the grounds and lessened retention. I also want a nice fat pre-breaking auger. Now this was first a big light bulb moment for me when I got the Bentwood V63 back in 2022 or so. They purposely built the auger to act as a pre-breaker, so it broke the beans up prior to entering the chamber, which actually really helps with grind consistency, and it can help with the heat effect that can occur to beans inside the chamber. Whenever they break, a massive amount of heat is left off with every single break, every fracture. In addition to that, if you don't have a good throughput, the grounds aren't going through quickly and evenly and hitting the burr face properly. If they're rubbing against each other, they're creating a lot of friction. And this is causing what I have called heat damage in the past, which can affect the taste of the coffee, most notably in Amethos Simonelli. For those baristas out there that know, you know. So a faster throughput is always ideal. And so we see this with slow feeding. Here is the burr carrier for an EK43. This is the auger. You have the other burr face sits right here. A burr is normally screwed in right here. You have another burr face here. Beans go in and the auger spins and it feeds those beans into the burrs. Now in the EK, they've had an auger for a long time and it does kind of break some of those beans. But the intentional idea of using it as a pre-breaker, intentionally designing it for that, the first I'm aware of is the Bentwood V63. Then after that, I know Zerno put one in and has been rocking that. Dennis took about 20 or 25 iterations to find the perfect combination and doing particle size analysis to ensure that not only was it feeding the beans, the shards, properly into the burrs, which was very important for his design because of something we'll talk about in a bit with his new burr designs, but he was also checking out the actual shards that the pre-breaker was making to ensure that they were consistent before being fed into the burrs themselves. If you're pre-breaking effectively the beans with the auger, there is no need to waste part of your burr geometry surface area with pre-breakers on it. This is what I mean by that. Here is a burr. Right here, you have a really intense angle going down, so that when another burr sits on here, you have a huge gap for the beans, full beans, to enter into the burr set, okay? And then you have big gapped teeth right here. These are those pre-breakers. The idea of this is for when beans to come in, since they're full-size beans, they can make it through the gap, so they have an initial cutting before they can be fed into the more narrow gap between the second and third stage of the crushing. Now, when you have a pre-breaking auger, that auger is already doing the job of that first phase. But all of these grinders, including Zerno, have not been taking that into account, and they still put normal burrs inside. Those shards are bypassing that first stage almost immediately in order to get to the crushing phase. So you're almost immediately overloading that crushing phase with a lot of pre-broken coffee beans. Is that a bad thing? No, but it is something that you can improve upon and you can iterate upon in order to make more use of that space. So whenever we have two burrs face to face and beans are being fed directly in, they're being pre-cut here, and then they jam all these different crushed grounds into the final stage. They're not just hitting the metal, they're hitting each other, right? So a bigger burr is going to allow a more even and consistent throughput for all of those individual beans to get more one-on-one time, essentially, with the burr itself. Bigger burrs have bigger potential for flavor. That doesn't mean bigger burrs a priori are superior to smaller burrs. But when you have a bigger burr face, you have more design capabilities to improve your coffee more so than a smaller burr does. So I've been begging for designers and for engineers to recreate the burr to take into account the pre-breaking auger, which would mean less of an intense angle down here. You don't need as big of a gap for beans to go through because they're shards. And then you can take away pre-breakers and go straight to crushing. We already cut the beans using the auger. Now it's time to crush. And I am happy to say that that is exactly what Dennis did in this grinder. The first one, to my knowledge, that actually took that upon themselves to redesign everything inside in order to create a burr that effectively has more surface area than anything else. On a normal 98mm burr, this is a base EK43 burr, you have these two kind of paddles right here. Now, this doesn't look like the same pre-breaker we had in the other, but in reality, due to the intense angle of this, it still has a huge gap for beans to be fed in and to be cut up. These are the main cutters, but these are also causing fractures. These kind of catch the beans into it during the revolution, suck them in, and this pre-breaks it. So whenever you can negate the need for that intense angle, which is more so causing cutting rather than crushing, you are able to essentially enlarge the area you can use for cutting. So if you take into account that pre-breaking auger and you say that is part of the burr because it's doing this part of the burr's job, then even though it's just a 98mm burr inside, it's really like a 120mm burr because the auger is part of the burr. In that sense, they really thought through the feeding rate of the auger as well as the particle distribution the auger gives whenever you don't have any type of burr inside, so you can just see what those are cutting at. And they made completely redesigned burrs inside. I do like variable RPM, but on the original, the one back here, the Monolith Max, the variable RPM only goes up to 400, which I don't think is really good enough. I actually enjoy a little bit higher RPM on occasion, not all the time, but I wanted it to have a higher capability. A, for lessened retention. When it's going really slow, it can be a bit of a bear. But also, I just think that for the purge and for everything else, it's nice to have a higher speed. So this one can go up to 900 RPM. Normally they were sourcing a really high quality Japanese motor for the one back here, but with this they have an American made servo motor that can be used dual voltage. You can use it 110 or 220, and it is fully programmable and a very cool upgrade to this. Is it overkill? Yes. The torque on it though is insane, and when you're using a pre-breaking auger, you need even more torque. Whenever this came out, I was just like, oh my god. This is like built for me. This is everything I've been screaming to the rooftops for, and it's finally out. They machine everything in-house, so even this extended hopper lid, because right now this only holds like 20-25 grams, the single dose one. If you want an XL hopper lid, this is all CNC milled from aluminum billet, including the little lid here. The catch cup, aluminum billet. pretty ridiculous. CNC milled. All of this is CNC, and if they could anodize in their own warehouse, they would. From what I understand, they outsource that, but everything else outside of fittings, some of the electronic components, and the motor, they're doing in-house, including hand soldering the PCBs and stripping wires and the like. Now, they added a deionizer on here, though I've been critical of deionizers in the past. I don't really think they're that helpful. In fact, I think they get messy. They very easily become not very helpful. I don't really enjoy doing RDT. I don't mind the chaff that comes out. I don't mind using a little brush to clean that off because I want to remove as much chaff as possible anyway from my brews. So that doesn't really bother me. A little bit of a mess, but I know it is for a lot of you. Now, what we have down here for the deionizer is there is a little chute you need to take out and clean every so often. Otherwise, it will get clogged with coffee that does fly into it, and then it becomes less effective. So that is there. But that is some of the upgrades they've done to this grinder. So this is the on-off switch. Back here, there's like a full on-off switch to turn on or off the grinder, and it's in standby mode, essentially. This activates the motor. Right here, it's a 3-phase toggle. Some of you may or may not know that the burrs built in-house and actually properly made in-house, they're Shuriken burrs, these spin clockwise, whereas the other burrs on the market, like SSPs, Malkunigs, etc., they spin counterclockwise, which is a bit of a perturbance, but it is what it is. So if you're wanting to use this grinder with other burr sets, you would need it to run counterclockwise. Well, because of this motor and because of this toggle, you can actually program one of the toggle phases to run in the opposite direction. So if you switch burrs out frequently, you can make one of the toggles do a reverse direction at a specific RPM. But anyway, right now, there are 3 modes: the top, the middle, the bottom. So there's 3 programmable steps for RPM control. Now, when I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe whenever you get it, it's like, at least mine was like 750 was the top, middle was like 400, and bottom's like 200. It is what it is. I'm not really that worried about it, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure the bottom is 200 though, 400, and then maybe 750. But anyway, you can plug this in. There's a little USB on the back. You'll have to use a laptop, but you can control and redefine what these 3 are. If you wanted 300, 250, 200, you could do that. If you wanted down being reverse 600, middle being, standard 300, top being standard 800, whatever it is, you can go through and you can change those so that you can run SSPs every now and then and switch in whatever. Remember, this does have an auger. So because there's an auger inside of it, you would also need to switch the auger if you went to counterclockwise. But that is going to require you to plug into the grinder and control the motor. It's all in their manual though, so it's not that difficult. Then the back button is a purge. This purges at 900 RPM. So you click that and it just goes much faster in order to clean out what's inside. Anyway, let's listen to this motor, which is now incredibly silent. So we'll put it on 200 to start with for the most silent, and I'll just ramp up the speed so you can hear it. Can't even really hear it, right? We go up. That's 400. And then maybe 600 or 750, I'm not quite sure. And then purge. Back down to 200. Super silent. Now, of course, things change when beans are in there. It gets a bit louder. But when it comes to this, it's very easy to accidentally leave it on because you can barely hear it. When I'm changing RPM, it's like I want either low, medium, or high. That's how I've always really done it. I think if you're saying you can taste the difference between 250 and 300, you're probably full of crap. On the Monolith Max, you have to sit there and roll that thing as it goes by the ones all the way to where you want to get to. Even on the EG1, I have to sit there and spin. It goes in tens at least, but I've got to spin. And I'm normally not doing gaps of even 100. I normally will do like low RPM or middle or high. So I personally like this, a simple toggle. Boom, and you can program it. Now, if you are frequently changing out burrs and the auger and everything else, it might be nice to have more options, but I'm going to imagine if you're switching out burrs, because you have to also switch the auger, you probably have time to plug in a laptop and switch it up real quick, and I'd imagine it wouldn't be a super frequent thing. So that is one of the downsides of this, is you can't just switch from their burst to SSP, their burst to SSP, like bing, bang, boom, bang. It's a bit more involved than that. I've been using this almost solely for filter since I got it a few months ago to really have an understanding of these burrs, and they give you juicy, sweet, clean brews that are very forgiving. Can you get more clarity? Well, sure. Can you get more layers? Sure. But as far as forgiveness goes, and as far as like well, forgiveness is the best word, because there are sometimes coffees that would taste better out of this than out of brew burrs because maybe the coffee wasn't perfect itself. Maybe the coffee had a little bit of a roast issue and it kind of covered it up because how forgiving these are, whereas on brew burrs in my EK43 are going to pinpoint that exact location of where the roast kind of messed up. So I find myself using this more than the 98 brew burrs because it's more forgiving without sacrificing clarity. Normally when you have a really forgiving burr, you're sacrificing a ton of clarity, and that's not really the case, at least for me, with this specific burr set. Now, of course, this is their new iteration without the screws. What I talked about in the Monolith Max video is the one with the screws. So let's get some filter coffee ready. I'm brewing up a washed Kenya from the Picky Chemist. So I'm going to do little spilsky. There we go. All right. 15 grams, and now you can hear what it grinds at. Now, on camera, I went ahead and recalibrated my grinder because I like burlock at 0. It didn't come like that out of the box, but I've changed it to that because that's what I like. So it now has burlock at 0, 600 microns. Let's go ahead and get this going. I'm gonna go for funsies at 200 RPM, so you can kind of see what that sounds like and how long it takes. So here we go. Then once it's done, purge. Get the rest out. Then you can turn off. You can use the thwacker. Of course, this is just going to release more chaff into the cup, but we'll go ahead and do the thwacker. And then here we go. Put that on. And we got out 15.2. I put in 15.2, got out 15.2. So we're going to use some water, and let's get this brewed. Now, I go pretty coarse on these. I like river rocks for my pour overs. So at 600 microns with my calibration, it's actually quite coarse. But again, these are coarse burrs. So whenever we do espresso with this, it's not going to choke your machine. Well, some people have said they've been able to, but if you're doing blooming espresso or something, this likely can't go fine enough. Not just because it can't, but the way that the burr is created, it has a bigger throughput, a bigger gap there at the end. So it's not going to be able to really get you a super fine particle size because it's made for filter. But you can definitely do turbo shots with this. You can do soup shots with this, and they make for incredible, incredible coffees. But this is what I've been doing every day, brewing at least one filter with this burr set, and I've been delighted. You may or may not know, those who watch, that I was a big part in the creation of the Pro Brew burrs on the Pietro hand grinder, and which has taken a lot of people. They love that grinder. A lot of people say it's their favorite for filter, beating out a lot of 98 millimeters. Not to toot my own horn, but I designed those burrs over multiple iterations. The company I was working with have a burr manufacturing facility, so I was able to go and just make iteration upon iteration, playing with certain changes. And what I wanted was really sweet but high clarity brew that was piercing clarity, and I wanted it to beat everything in the hand grinder market as far as clarity goes, and I think that I was able to achieve that. I also love the ZP6. That was not even a grinder being offered some years ago. I had a friend in the Philippines that sent me his model he bought before they stopped trialing it because it wasn't being received with good success throughout Taiwan in their test market. My friend sent it to me. I tasted it. I made a video about it in 2022, I believe. And within like 6 months, Espresso re-released it based off of the feedback from my video. And now it's a beloved filter grinder. So those both have a very obvious bias towards clean, juicy, sweet brews. So that's kind of my desire in a cup of coffee. So if you've ever used a ZP6 or Pietro Pro Brew, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Those are kind of my my styles of brew. So I don't drink, when it comes to filter, I can't tell you the last time I purposely brewed a dark roast filter. That's not really my jam. So I can do dark roast espresso, but with filter, I just like light, juicy brews. So anyway, let's take a sip of this Kenya. It smells divine. insanely juicy. It's making me salivate a lot. That's why I'm having to hold back. Sorry if there was gross noises for some of you in misophonia, but absolutely a fantastic cup of coffee. I also love the Time More 078. I really hyped that grinder up. When they did a pre-release, I was able to get one from someone that was selling to Norway. I put my VPN to Norway and got an 078 before they released to the US. Hyped it, got a lot of criticism for hyping it. Now a lot of people do love the 078, but I would say this easily has the juiciness, if not more so, than the 078, and it's got the clarity of something like the Pietro Pro Brews. It does not still have the clarity of like the Brew Burrs in the 98 millimeter factor, but again, that's not really what they're going for. And we have a little visitor. Rocky, come here. Let's show the people one of my two doggies. This is my little teeny tiny doggy, my wife's doggy. I got a big Portuguese water dog. He's somewhere around here. But anyway, so really juicy, sweet, clean brews. Very, very easy to make something good with it. It's just good. It's just good. I really like this burr set. So I'm going to keep this and I'll drink it as we continue going. All right, so I've got about 20 grams of Saka's Crema Bar. Now, again, I can't say this enough. These are coarse burrs. They're not made for espresso, though there are reports of people doing more espresso-style shots with them. It's more so soup and turbo-style shots. This is not made to do espresso. So when you do light roasts, you're going to have even less resistance than what we're about to see. I'm going to be grinding at burr chirp, 20-gram dose. This is 600 RPM. All right, so this is just to show you kind of what these burrs are capable of as far as building pressure. Now, I would not ever recommend doing light roasts at full pressure shots regardless. That's just not tasty to me. But that's why I'm showing with the darker. All right, let's see what this is capable of at burr chirp. So we're raising the piston. This is the meticulous machine. We're raising the piston, and I have emulated something like a spring lever kind of Italian style shot. So here we go. Look at that. We're choking it with dark roast. Now, this is at burr chirp, so that means that we can choke at burr chirp and we could loosen it up and get good 1 to 2 shots with darker roasted coffees. Now, you put an ultralight coffee in here, and even at burr chirp, it won't hold pressure at all. It'll be done in 8 seconds, okay? So, but I mean, right here, look at that. We've choked the shot. You can kind of see in the mirror down here what's going on. So we have successfully choked an espresso machine, but that's with a dark roast coffee. The lighter you go, the less range there is. So in reality, this would probably need to be closer to 50 microns maybe for this darker roasted coffee. But the reality is, it is capable of doing that. Do I recommend coarse burrs for dark roast shots? Sure, dark roast is fine with it. The coarse burrs, though, are really going to be optimized when you're doing soup shots or turbo style shots. So if you're not messing around with 9-bar stuff, you should be good to go just using this one set of burrs. Well, let's go ahead and open this bad boy up. We'll take a look at the burr set, talk a little bit more about the burrs, and then we'll continue on. All right, so I've got this torque hex wrench, essentially. We're going to put that in at 4 Newton meters. Pop that off. And the third one's right here. There we go. All right, let me just take off that front. And here we have that front location. So you have a ball bearing here, and this is where you're controlling the dialing in. So let's go ahead and get a little brush and clean this off a bit. So it does a good job of keeping coffee out from up here. There's a little coffee just on the actual faceplate. Get those off. You have 2 aligning pins here that align right there. I'm just going to clean out the chute a bit. Yeah, that's good enough. This thing is heavy as lead, though. So this is where the dial mechanism is, and a high-quality ball bearing that goes straight onto the auger itself. So that's where it gets connected to, and it controls the in and out of this burr. Here is the front burr carrier. So as you see, there are grounds caught around it, but that's from doing that espresso. It's not, like I said, this specific burr set's not really made for espresso, but even still, we just have a little bit of grounds that got caught right there on the edges. Now, to be honest, this is the first time since I got it that I've taken it apart. Well, that's not true because I've switched burrs out. It's the first time, though, probably in 2 months that I've taken this off. So this is, but it looks like this is mostly from that dark roast espresso I just did. With filter, it doesn't seem like there's any left over from that. So it doesn't seem like much buildup goes from filter. But anyway. All right, so let's take a look at this burr. So as you can see, we have a completely different burr geometry than what is out there right now because they're not taking into account pre-breakers. You have an immediate feeding to the final phases. So you've got this primary cutting phase, and then you have the finishing, which is more flattened triangle area. Now you will notice this one little jut, this what they call paddle. This was a necessary inclusion. Now because Dennis is the first I'm aware of to negate pre-breakers due to a pre-breaking auger, he found that this was necessary for any bigger chunks that may have gone past the pre-breaker in order to feed them in. If it was a little bit too big to go in, this thing could help kind of grab it and pull it into the burrs themselves to finish up the cutting. So, I mean, that opens up so much more surface area when you take into account this big old auger right here. Let's go ahead and take a look on the inside, and then we'll take these burrs off to switch with what's in the Max 3. Now, again, this was made for filter, and it doesn't seem like any of these are from the filter coffee. It looks like it's all from that dark roast we just did. But anyway, let's get that all cleaned out, down through the chute. And then we'll actually measure what this is. So that's 0.46 grams of this dark roast stuff that's in there. But it also looks like there could be fines from light. I know that I didn't get that much retention from dark due to the fact that I had a full dose. So maybe the dark's just overwhelming the smell. All right, so we take the auger off, which is sitting at, that one is at a 5 Newton meter torque. Important to remember all of these. But anyway, here we have the auger itself. So you can get in and switch out just the auger. Now I've already started unscrewing these 5 screws here. So we'll just continue with that. Now, is this a pain to switch? Yes, it is. But normally with these really high precision grinders, all of these things are kind of necessary if you're wanting to maintain the tolerances and the alignment, especially when you're taking into account blind burrs, which is what we have here. All right, so the way this is held on is there's a little ridge on the inside. This sits and holds that down, and then you screw it on. On the back, they do have aligning pins and screw holes for the Monolith Max 3. So that's our 2 burr sets right there. So let's go ahead and take this one out. This one's only held by the 3 back screws, which again is why you have 3 back screws here. So we can take that out in the same way we took this one out. Now, it's really important that when you assemble and reassemble grinders, that you're using torque screwdrivers, torque wrenches, things like that, so that you can make sure everything is evenly is put back on the way they're intended. So each of these have very specific numbers that they were tightened on with. And so, for instance, the 5 screws around here and the 3 screws on the back were at 2 Newton meters. The one for the auger was at 5, and the ones from the front screws that fit the front piece on were at 4. So it is important to follow those guidelines to ensure that you maintain the quality that's coming out of the factory, which is, again, built on precise alignment. Everything is within 10 microns during the alignment process. I'm not sure if they all come with it, but mine came with this set right here. I already have some torque wrenches and whatnot, but this was a really nice one since the 3 bits that are sent with it fit this machine perfectly. But anyway, here is our burr set. They both have that little ridge inside, so they can be interchangeable, but there you go. So whenever they are matched up, you can see that paddle can catch beans to go in. But the gap here is much smaller than on other 98 millimeter burrs due to the fact that there's a pre-breaking auger. So let's go ahead and clean this out. We can take a look at this. So again, everything is machined very painstakingly in-house, which is why it demands such a crazy price, but I think you can understand why the price is as high as it is. He wanted to make the burr chamber incredibly small, so right behind it you have the back ball bearing as well, so that he can maintain the precision. That was one of his decisions in creating this grinder, was to make sure the burr chamber was really small, so that, and really flush against that back ball bearing, so that he can have as much of the precision as he can from the servo motor to the burr set itself. So everything is kind of truncated in there, and that's why the auger is teeny tiny as far as front to back. It is quite chunky though. It reminds me of the P100. Chungus. But anyway, let's go ahead and take the burrs out of Monolith Max 3 and we will get them swapped. Okay, well, I was taking out the burrs from the Monolith Max 3. I forgot when I got this new Shura cone, The tolerance was so tight, I actually took a rubber mallet to kind of make it go in place. I don't feel like trying to remove that. So I did remove one burr just to show you. This is the SSW burr, the Sugarcone Sweets. A fantastic burr for kind of like sweet espresso. I think it does solid for filter. It's nothing like, I think the light medium does better for filter. Well, that's debatable actually. I enjoy the filter from this. It's just a different style, more like a normal Kinu burr, or like a Dining Lab Sweet in a way. But anyway, just to show you how these also fit, obviously, because they're made to, we'll go ahead and line up the self-aligning pins, which actually that one already has them in there. So we'll take the self-aligning pins out of here, and you just go to self-aligning. There we go. So you get it aligned on there, and then you'll just put this disc back on, and then you screw the little 5 screws back in, and bada bing, bada boom. There you have the inside one. To fit on the outside burr carrier, so like I said, they have the 3 self-aligning pin grooves. You will use the pin grooves again. So you would align it in here, but then the screw holes is what you would use for the outer one. So you just flop it in, then you screw it right down, just like so. Precision is through the roof. Like I could sit here, I wasted time on my first Monolith Max showing you the dial indicator. I've used the dial indicator on this as well with a nice perpendicular contact with my dial point. And it's precise as ever. It's less than 10 microns, incredibly precise from Dennis up at Kafatek. And he actually sent me a video of my dial indicator at the factory. So everything that they do is really high precision. You can guarantee that your grinder is going to come aligned whenever you get one from here. Now, again, a cost is to be paid for that, but this is a very small market of people doing this. My biggest excitement is the fact that everything I've been asking for has been implemented in here. Now, does that mean I think that the grinder game is over? Heck no. I think that we have a lot more that we can do in the grinder space, a lot more technologies that can be implemented that have not yet been so. Do I like this grinder? I think that's pretty apparent that I really, really, really like this grinder. There is a bit of mess whenever I'm grinding coffee. I get a little chaff mess, but that's because I don't RDT and I don't really care about the ionizer, and so mine gets, I don't clean it out very often, so it doesn't become as effective when you don't clean it out, but the mess is a little bit there. As far as the efficacy of the grinder, through the roof. I get some of the best filter brews that I've gotten with this grinder. I get absolutely incredible soup and high clarity espresso, like turbo style shots with light roasts. I don't use this for darker roasted coffees. I use my SSWs in the Monolith Max 3, which I think does a stellar job with it. And I talk about 98mm burrs to the extreme in my Monolith Max 3 review. So if you're wanting more burr comparisons, you can go there. I do find that the SSWs that are screwless are a step up from the screwed ones, and I find the coarse are a step up from the screwed ones. This has achieved what the SSP cast from pre-2015 hasn't been able to achieve, which is a very high clarity. It's been able to achieve that without losing juiciness, without losing sweetness, and the most important, without losing forgiveness. It's a very forgiving grinder. It can do all roast levels really well. Filter coffee's amazing from it. The fast flowing espresso from it is absolutely incredible. It's decadent. It rivals my EG1 with ULF burrs for my soup style shots. I do tend to use this one more for soup style shots, the EG1, but it's mostly because it's dialed into that, and this is dialed into filter. But this can absolutely rival the ULFs when it comes to those juicy style brews. But I think what they've done with this burr set is optimizing everything to lessen potential heat damage, which this one does have some of that, and I know that there are people who disagree with the existence of that, and that's absolutely fine. But there is a taste difference, and I tend to attribute some of that, if it's a negative one, to some of the heat damage because of this pre-breaking system, this 2-stage grinder. So I'm really excited about this grinder. I'm very happy that someone finally took up the kind of proverbial torch in order to create burrs that take into account the existence of a pre-breaker. I'm excited it was a manufacturer that has an obsession with high precision. Manufacturing alignment is incredible out of box. You don't have to faff around with it. But anyway, I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I received this grinder, because right here on the back, they did something a little cutesy. On the serial number, serial says Lance the Burrman Hedrick. I like that a lot. And you know, Dennis is a burrman. He creates his own burrs, so for him to put that on there, I was just like, oh, makes my heart happy. And then down here, they put, "We hope you brew something tasty today," which I thought was so sweet. It was like them responding to my call. I always end the videos with, "I hope you brew something tasty today," which I thought was just a really fitting thing for this grinder. Everything CNC, built in-house, incredible motor, certified US, blah, 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 whatever you want, we're good to go. So I think that's enough. We've gone way deep, way too deep into this. Ask any questions that you have down below. But I think that's about it for today. In the same way that Kafatek wished me that kind little sentence on the bottom, I hope that you brew something tasty today. And cheers.